What's up, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the Sit Down. As always, if you enjoy this video interview, please make sure you hit that like button and let me know what you think of today's discussion in the comment section below. If you're new around here, you just haven't done it yet, or you're living under a rock and seeing our video for the first time, please do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button below now so you never miss another Sit Down video. If you're listening to us on audio through Spotify or iTunes, welcome in. Please leave us a detailed review and a 5-star rating. This is episode 199 of the Sit Down. I'm your host, Jeff Nadu. Episode 200 on the horizon. 5 years I'm almost doing this show. What a run. We're back at it, though, better than ever. Another interview for you. And we have really never talked to the families of the people that we discuss on this channel. Let's not sugarcoat it. A lot of the people we talk about have done bad things in their life. Some of them die in prison. Some of them die in their own bed. Some of them die in the streets. But the saddest part of all this is the families that are affected. I mean, just think about your own family. Think about how many people are affected by these individuals going to prison. Think about how their lives are changed significantly. Today, we're going to talk to someone whose grandfather's quite well known. We know his story. They called him Little Vic Orena. We've done a video on Little Vic. And recently, a website has popped up, freelittlevic.com. What's the goal of this website? And is Vic Orena someone who could possibly get a compassionate release? I mean, he's been in prison for longer than some of the people watching this video have been alive. And he's largely been forgotten. Could he actually get a compassionate release? Let's hear more about it. I bring in his granddaughter, Jackie Orena. Jackie, you are really doing something that I find very respectable. You know, I don't have any grandparents anymore. I know what I would have done to fight. Look, we know some of the things that some of the people we talk about have done, but you are looking at it from a different lens. You're a family member of these people. I have this photo. This is you as a little child with your grandpa. You know, there's photos like this of you and you either siblings or cousins. These are the things that we and what I do don't see, right? We just talk about people from a criminal standpoint. I guess I want to just ask you first, what's the goal of your website? What's the goal of what you're trying to do here?
So, thank you for the intro.
No problem.
I think for me, obviously, I was a little girl when my grandfather went away. You know, some of the pictures that you've shown were the greatest memories of my life. You know, we're talking about family gatherings. We have a very close family. Those pictures even show, like I said, some of the greatest memories. My cousins in the picture, my siblings. I mean, we grew up closer than most people are with their siblings. You know, we're a very tight group. My grandfather, that's my grandmother in the picture. Also, myself, my sister, my cousin Vicky, my sister Patty, my brother Victor, and my cousin John.
You're on the far left, right?
Yes, where the light is kind of blurring me out. But yes, that is me. So, you know, a lot of this stems from being a little girl. And of course, all the articles and everything that were out at that time were things that I was reading as a little kid, you know, as a 9 or a 10-year-old, you know, so you start seeing the people that you know, and you're seeing the experiences that you have with these people. And then you're reading these articles with these crazy narratives. And, you know, you go to school and kids are talking about it. And you're walking down the street and there's kids that are saying, you know, I'm not allowed to play with you. Your family is criminals and, you know, stay away from them, or running across the street. And you're like, what's going on? You know, you can't understand it from a child's perspective because these are the greatest humans that you know, and they've shown you nothing but love and happiness and, you know, great joy. So to hear someone else's perspective of these things, you kind of look and you're like, is this true? Could this possibly be? So, you know, during that time, you're not going to get answers from anybody. You know, my father at the time went away shortly after too. He didn't get out until I was 19 years old. So I didn't really get to ask questions until I was an adult. I didn't really get to dive into his case or look at details or see anything till, you know, I could kind of understand it. So that's why, you know, going from a child to today, the frustration I think behind it is, one, not only is some of the narrative that's out there incorrect, but also the condition that my grandfather is in, and knowing that this is my grandfather and someone that I love so much and gave
Yeah.
me the best days of my life. And the reason that my family exists or I'm even here is because of him. How do I not fight forever till his last breath or last days to try to get him home?
For sure.
The
So
condition, yeah.
your contention is, and I want to talk about kind of your life when you kind of realized everything that went on. I want to talk about his condition. We're going to talk about all that, but I have to ask. I mean, you have never, as far as from what I've talked to you about, you've never really contended like your grandfather did the things he did. Your thought, though, at this point is he is 90 years old. Okay, and the thought I've had on this show at times, we've talked about it.
I do have to stop you because you're
Okay.
saying he did the things he did. So was he involved in organized crime? I think we have enough information to say that
Sure.
he was, right?
Yeah.
Was he guilty of the things that he went to jail for?
Mhm.
Absolutely not. So there's two different things here. You know, you could look at it like, well, he's a criminal and he's doing things and whatever. Yes, but there's also a lot more to the story. So
Sure.
does it mean that, you know, he did all of the things? No. And we know that there's millions of people in jail that are innocent and aren't guilty of some of the crimes that they're in there for. Sometimes your life choices can paint you to be a character that is easy to put in that situation or pin something on. So I think he's guilty of that. But continue.
Yeah, no, I really just kind of my thought always was, at what point do we say to ourselves, why are 90-year-old people in prison, right? What flight risk do they have? And when we look into your grandfather's case, there is a documented report. There are documented reports. They've been reported on that he is not the same person that he was 20, 30 years ago. He has gotten to the point where dementia has made him into a person that's different. He doesn't remember you at points. He is not the same person. He is not leading, allegedly, a crime family anymore. The goal of yours family, I think, at this point is to get him home. So the last few years of his life are spent in peace, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's tough, though, just to think about that. As you alluded to, there's a lot of things that, and look, I don't think the FBI is fair in a lot of this stuff. Are there things that they put on these people? And yes, RICO is bullshit. Let's just be quite honest. It's a bullshit charge. It's very broad. It's a very broad brush where, again, you're put at the top of something, whether you are or not, and everything done below you is something you're responsible for. But I want to start at the beginning. Your grandpa was born, in the essentially mid 30s. He went to reform school. Do you know why? I know his father died when he was young. You mentioned that to me.
Let's definitely backtrack a little. So, my grandfather has definitely had a hard time in his early life. Around, I would say, 5 years old, his family, they were a successful furniture business, his uncles and everything, in Brooklyn. Around age 5, his father, along with maybe 4 or 5 other family members, ended up with tuberculosis. And it wiped out a strong amount of the men in his family. Sadly, my grandfather, losing his dad, one of the things he actually said to me on a visit more recently, like maybe during COVID times, he had kind of lost his memory at this time, but every once in a while he would have like this very vivid story of
We
like.
see that. I've seen that with, yeah.
So I'm sitting with him and all of a sudden he just turns to me and he goes, my father was the greatest man alive. My father was everything. And I'm thinking about it like, could you imagine you're only alive 5 years and this is how strong of a feeling you have towards your father? And he said to me, I just remember my job was to always get him water because, with tuberculosis, you're thirsty. And he said he remembered the day that he died and they were waiting, I guess, for someone to come and take him out, that he sat in bed with his father who passed. And he remembers the feeling of his cold skin and touching him and just remembering like, I'm never going to see my dad again. And he told this to me in his late 80s. This was a memory he had with dementia. And I just remember thinking, I never heard this story from him before. And it's just sometimes with dementia and they're older, it's like you could see the little kid in them.
Yeah.
And, it really like touched me because I was like, oh my God, he started off with this very painful memory. So from that point on, his mother was probably like 21 years old. So now she's a single mother. She had to go off to work with the, a lot of the Orena men now being gone. My grandfather moved to Bed-Stuy. And his grandmother helped raise him. His mom went to work and she was young and single, and it was kind of like frowned upon at that time. You didn't really see like a young single mother with,
Yeah.
her two boys or whatever. And, my grandfather had a hard time. I think by the time he was 12, there's another story that a lot of people don't know. At 12 years old, they used to ride on the back of the trolley cars, and they would catch a ride or whatever. And my grandfather was on the back with one of his friends, and the kid leaned out and he hit his head on like a parked car.
Wow.
So my grandfather jumped up and went to help the kid. And they walked about 2 blocks, and my grandfather's assisting him, and the kid collapsed. And someone on the road came over and took the kid to the hospital, and it turned out the kid had a skull fracture and he actually passed away. So my grandfather, even though it wasn't his fault and, it was the kid's action, he felt terrible about this. And now the mother of the child was an alcoholic, and she would see my grandfather walking down the street and she would shout out the window drunk at him, like, "This is your fault. My son should have never hung out with you." So now my grandfather is going to school every day, and the paper showed this article that said, Vic Orena was on the trolley cart. And even though it showed, I do have the article I could send to you, it does show that he assisted him and, whatever. The kids were saying he was there and he was like the wrong type of kid and whatever. So he stopped going to school, and his nanny couldn't get him to go to school. So they sent him to reform school.
I got you. Okay. Wow. So, I mean, in 5, 10, 12 years, a lot of stuff happens. Father dies, who's his rock. Everybody's father's their rock, right? This is the early 40s. Mother, it can't, she's doing her best, but that's that. A friend of his dies. People blame it on him. What a rough 12 years. Does it, I mean, I say this so much on this channel. I don't mean to keep saying it, but does it surprise you that like, even in some of the things that your grandpa, ended up getting into, do you think that if his father was around, do you think it would have ever, do you think he had his father, he wouldn't have?
I mean, you could say that. They might have stayed in a different neighborhood. He might have took over the family's furniture business. Who knows? We never know what path could have happened. There is a reason that things happen or your life goes in certain directions, and every decision is one that's going to lead you to a certain path. So could I say? I have no idea, but he did end up where he was. And then he, was away in reform school, and then things changed when he got out, because by the time he came home, things were a lot different. You miss that gap of kids growing up and you see certain people that are doing drugs or, and that was something that always turned him off. He hated drugs, and he came back and saw that's what a lot of people were into. He also found out that his mother was dating somebody at the time that was a wise guy, and he was very abusive to his mother. So he came home to finding out that his mother was being beaten by this guy. And he was a tough kid after reform school. They're not playing games in there. So I think it kind of toughened him up too. It gave him a little bit of that, kind of knowledge that you don't get from school. It's just more of dealing with people and kids that were tough. So I think he came out, and, I've seen this story in different places. And of course I've asked my family that he found like a zip gun on the street and he took shots at this guy, and he, went to attack this guy that was a gangster that was abusing his mother. And I think once he did not care and everyone saw that it didn't bother him who this guy was, and he went after him, he didn't hurt, I think he like got into a physical altercation with him. Obviously the zip gun didn't kill the guy or anything, but word on the street now was like, don't play with Vic. He's not going to take any shit, So I think that kind of opened the door, because now he's home. And you have to think the men that were on the street now, you don't have a father. Who do you look up to? So the men on the street were at a different level of class than they are now. We're not talking about like Sopranos cast, no offense, but we're not talking about a bunch of guys that are sitting in wife beaters on the street with like, pizza stain on it.
They're like suits, and they're very powerful people.
And nice cars and shoes. And my grandfather came home completely poor and was putting cardboard in his shoes.
Listen, Jackie, there's no, I again say this many times. There's no, all these people, their lives are kind of figured out in some way that any kid would do. We see it in every ethnic group, whether it's black, Spanish, whatever. You don't have a father. You don't have any people above you. You look down the street, you see the people that are making money. they take you under their wing, and the rest is history. It's very simple. I got to ask, I did some research. I always do. I've done videos on your grandpa. I've heard through the grapevine, and maybe you can clarify. Maybe it's completely untrue. Was your grandpa related to Carmine Persco very distantly?
So no, you know what it is, like Italian families and everything. We have cousins,
Yeah,
people,
that are not your cousins. Okay.
The Persicos and the Orenas have decades of, friendship or close, dealings. So it's not like, even to this day, there's certain Persicos that I grew up with that I still refer to them as my cousins, So it's just we're not blood related. So no.
Okay. Yeah, that was something I wanted to ask. But so obviously, your father or grandfather obviously had these certain surroundings. We can't knock that he went into some of the things just because that's what a lot of people did. I don't think people quite realize some of these neighborhoods, doing, let's say, as a loan shark, that's a normal job a lot of people have, right? Like it's not, let's say, like if you live in Kansas, that would be crazy to be a loan shark. But in Brooklyn, everybody was doing it. I got to ask about your grandma. When did they meet? What was that about?
So actually, when he moved to Bed-Stuy, she was his neighbor.
Nice.
So they grew up as kids, next door neighbors.
And you guys, and you just had a huge family. I want to ask about your life though, because we'll talk about some of the stuff on the street. But I want to ask about your life. When did you realize? You said you read newspapers. You saw things like when you'd have family parties. Did you ever wonder like who some of the people were there? Obviously, your grandfather was, I guess, in some sort of way, a powerful guy. You had to have thought there was something. Maybe you mentioned kids at
No,
school.
I think, as a kid, he was such a loving, generous, like, man. We had our Sunday dinners together, every
Mhm.
holiday we spent together. So no, I just thought he was, the greatest man on earth. I didn't think anything, honestly. It's just big Italian family. So we always were together. We were always just very close. It wasn't anything opposite of what I seen. I grew up with family. It wasn't like I was one of those kids that were like, I'm having play dates with my friends on the block. It was like family time. You hung out, it was with your family. So I kind of grew up with just a very close family. And a lot of the people that you saw were just like everybody else's family at the time.
And that's the thing about grandparents too. We don't talk enough about that. Grandparents everything good happens with grandparents. You don't really have to worry about your life. They do everything for you. They cook for you. You have a good time. It's not like your parents where they're kind of telling you what to do. Grandparents offer wisdom, but they're more of just they
Love.
do the things your parents won't do,
Yeah.
right? Um, and like seeing a photo like this, I mean, it's such a what was this photo? Do you remember what this
That
was?
was my uncle's wedding.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a family wedding. Um, that was a family wedding. I mean, we did even like we would go to Montauk. We had a house in Montauk, all the cousins. It was just like the whole summer we hung out together. Like we just did normal family things. I think going back to like what you said, when did you realize? I think when when everything started to happen and, my grandfather got arrested and, my dad was still home and we were waiting for all those things, I started to notice a lot of weird things. Like for one example is, I would even see my dad like kind of, looking around him all the time or whatever. And I would come home from school and I would see like a parked truck that said like, landscaping with like a Hispanic last name. And there would be like 3 white dudes in it with Ray-Bans. And I'm like, that seems weird. And my dad would be like, I would come home and he'd be like, oh, it's probably the FBI. Like, so it wasn't anything, where I could say growing up was different. I have my best memories are from when I was a child with my family. So I think that's part of the reason I want to fight so hard for him too, while he's in this condition, just in his last days, if he could be surrounded by all the people that he gave such wonderful memories to and meet the grandkids he never met or the great grandchildren that never got a chance to be with him. To me, the thought of that potentially happening is why like I just want to fight so hard for it. If everything that he was accused of was accurate and whatever, and there wasn't all this crazy stuff that went on in between, then maybe I would have a different stance on it. But, like I mentioned before, even my dad's case coming up, my dad was hit with 4 cases as well, 4 indictments with, many things on it. And he was facing life as well, multiple life sentences. So the most important thing with my grandfather's case is, right now for me, I try to file for compassionate release. They say that his crimes outweigh like his health. There's no going back from what he did. So I was denied 3 times, even though his health kept getting worse. It's never getting better. He has dementia. I mean, he's also had a heart attack in prison. He has a pacemaker in there. He had an aneurysm burst in there. He almost died so many times. He's not getting better. And his dementia is so bad to the point that, even the last time I went to visit him, they're like, okay, wheel him here, wait for him. He needs assistance with everything. So, you have to tell them the day before, they have to get him ready. And, it's a lot of work, and he's always in and out of the hospital. He's always sick. Even the strain that it puts on the system, who's paying for this? What are we doing? Why not? At this point, if this man's so in the condition that he's in, why not send him home for his family to have to deal with it?
This is the age-old question, and I've talked about at what point should there be especially in federal prison, an age where no matter what your crime is, if you are over a certain age, funding that you have to wonder, is it redundant, right? What is a person capable of at that age? Here's the problem, Jackie, that I think in this situation you're going to run into. A lot of the feds are going to point to and say, well, let's go to the same family, Sonny Franzese. He was out there in his 90s doing stuff. And again, it's a different case. It doesn't matter. It's a whole different situation, but they're always going to point to that. And this is one article I read, and it's featured on your website. This is something that I'd read. I think it was in the New York Times. This is about your grandpa, about dementia.
This article actually came out shortly after one of his denials. It took them 9 months to get back. So they are telling me, even, we also are fighting for his, for a retrial or, to open up the case, because there's major evidence that was withheld during his trial. Okay. It's so major that over 24 men were acquitted after on similar charges revolving around this war. And most of it has to do with the Devecchio Scarpa relationship. There's a lot of information there. When this evidence is put in front of a jury, okay, people are acquitted. We're not talking about things that are this is blatant evidence. For example, to get into some of the things, I mean, some of these articles you'll see on that one, I don't know if you could see this picture. It's like black eye for FBI. This is during my my dad's case. You have jurors that are quoted in here saying things like Scarpa was running free, doing what he wanted to do. This is all while he's on FBI watch. You have people saying that it's mind-blowing what the government gets away with. I have 3 or 4 ones that are there quoted in there. They say this was a group of guys trying to keep themselves alive. Scarpa was running free and doing what he wanted to do. Okay. There's a lot of quotes from these jurors that are just saying it's insane the amount of involvement that the FBI actually had. So now, if my grandfather is serving, a RICO case for conspiracy to murder, and he's doing hundreds of years and 3 life sentences and all of this stuff, but you have the same kind of evidence showing that the FBI and CIs were guilty of more murders than anybody in this entire thing that they want to call a war. See, the thing is with the FBI, and, a lot of people don't realize, because for years they have been doing this, right? We're talking about COINTELPRO, where they would go in and have all these little games that they would play to manipulate situations and get people against them and whatever. My family's belief is that some of these tactics were used in organized crime then. Now, they say that this stopped being used in the 70s, but in reality, Scarpa was a rat or an informant since the 60s. So you're telling me that some of these things were in their playbook, that they just stopped doing it, that, these tactics weren't used. For example, they talk about this war and they're saying that, my grandfather went rogue and he wanted to gain power and whatever. And that's just not the truth. That's the story that the FBI put out there. That's the story that Devecchio wanted to plant to all of his news people at the time. I mean, he had close ties with Jerry Capici and all of these news reporters. And these stories are hitting the press. And it's like, where are they getting this information? the truth of the matter is, they talk about this story where, somebody tried to kill my grandfather. My grandfather saw men that weren't from the neighborhood. Okay. We're talking about Johnny Pate and Carmine Sessa that weren't from Long Island, that are in Long Island. And he actually went to go up to them in the car to see what the hell they were doing there. And they took off. So he's like, something weird's going on. So now if this whole narrative of my grandfather wanted to just gain power and he was rogue, why would he contact everybody to see what's going on? Why would he be like, hey, this is weird. What's up? Now, everybody knew these were Scarpa's crew, Scarpa's men. And also everybody's saying that Scarpa was a rat. Like Carmine Sessa himself was telling everybody that he was a rat. So it's very hard to believe a lot of these things and not see the clear, blatant, correlation between the FBI agent and Scarpa, who I think was acting as an individual. Even to this day, if I ask my father, like, do you really believe? He's like, I don't believe it was anybody but Scarpa and Devecchio that used this tactic to break people down, and to take people off the streets.
So you're kind of surmising that Gregory Scarpa, on behalf of Lin Devecchio, who's part of the FBI, this was a scheme from the beginning to essentially ensnarl all sorts of people, and that Scarpa, in a way, almost was an FBI agent.
Well, Scarpa, we know, was, definitely involved with the FBI since the 60s.
Sure. It's not a crazy, it wouldn't be surprising. I don't think it's.
Here's the thing. If we only know Scarpa Devecchio and there weren't other people like Spiracco that put out statements and other rats that started saying the FBI knew I was killing people. As a matter of fact, in the Scarpa, the Spiracco letter here, he does say at one point that the FBI was willing to let, the Sessas get blamed for murders that he committed. And they knew that he was guilty of it. Like he says how many times they knew that he was, responsible for these. I'll send it to you so you could do your own research.
So you're kind of, again, surmising that in a way, Scarpa was allowed to have carte blanche and do what he wanted as long as people, because in a way, when I talked to John Gleeson, I asked him about Sammy Gravano. I said, why are you willing to do a deal with this guy who had killed, probably in upwards of had 19 people killed? Why are we doing deals with someone like that? And he essentially said, well, we feel that the people that he was going to get off the street outweighed the things that he had done. So they're kind of saying, we're okay with murder.
Well, you know what? They are saying that. And Scarpa killed more people than anybody. And this is who they chose to back. This is the person that they're using. It doesn't make sense. Now, for example, thank you. For example, let's talk about the Nikki Black hit. Okay. We have a situation where there is task force everywhere on the streets watching what's going on because there's supposedly this war going on. Now, that morning, the club that he hangs out with gets raided and they take all of the guns from the club, right? Shortly after, Devecchio, which this is documented, calls for a task force meeting, an emergency task force meeting. So with an emergency task force meeting, all of the men are off the street. Nobody is watching. Now, at this point, his personal he's handling Scarpa. Now, all of a sudden, Scarpa goes in and does a hit.
Yeah, it's almost like I get what you're saying. And it's not crazy, right? It wouldn't be hard to believe that from the beginning, Greg Scarpa was basically an agent of, on the street, and his goal was to.
He was.
Yeah, right. He was to do what he had to do, and let's be honest, Jackie, it worked. Okay, Lin Devecchio is on the street. He's living his life. He was found somehow not guilty. Lin Devecchio is a scumbag. We all know it. Everybody knows it.
Well, also, just before to change the point, they talk about who's credible, who's not, right? So they used Scarpa when they wanted to, but then on Scarpa's deathbed, he actually, wrote a statement to one of the lawyers that said that, no one told him to put a hit on anybody and that it was him and Devecchio, but no one shows that. that disappeared. There's a few articles that reported it. I mean, I don't know how to obtain all of these documents. I'll see it in an article or whatever, and you don't know what's right, but this has been reported as well. So, you know, you also have his son. We have Scarpa Jr. Now, this is another article. I'm just going to grab it that I have on my page. This is the original, but I do have scanned copies and everything on the Free Little Vic page. So it says, "My father, the killer." And he said in here, you know, there's no reason I would want to help Vic at all. You know, he said his father killed Osara. So if my grandfather is serving 3 life sentences, conspiracy to murder, and this is one of the people that you're putting it on, and his son is saying my father did it, and he clearly has no reason to help my grandfather at all. They just say, oh, you know what? He's not credible. The problem with that is he goes away. Then he tells them about 9/11. They do nothing about it. And then 9/11 happens. But then the next time he hears something about the bombings, they go in and they find out that his information was credible. So the thing about the FBI, it's weird. They'll use information when it goes with their narrative. But then when people are telling their truth or another side of the story, they go away, or they're crazy, or they're not credible, or they disappear. So why are we not able to put these people on the stand then?
Right.
Let someone really dig in deep and find out what's going on, because a lot of times, especially if this situation, how I feel this happened, and I really truly believe that the FBI and Scarpa were behind this whole thing, you know, why not be able to ask these people questions? That, you know, they put it in a place where we can't reopen my grandfather's trial. They just deny it. There's just no conversation about it. They won't let him out for compassionate release. It's just, there's like a stamp, just automatic no. Every single thing I'm trying to do. The evidence is there. People were acquitted.
But Jackie, I gotta ask. I gotta push back here. Okay. Wild Bill Catolo, for instance. Okay. Why was he out killing? Like, who was instructing him to? Was it just he did that, or because again, I want to surmise that the FBI, and this is what they say.
But you're talking about men,
that
obviously are tough men, right?
Sure.
Now, let me ask you a question. You're a tough person. You're going to defend yourself. So now the FBI randomly has, you know, people out there. They're informants or whatever. They have someone like Scarpa that's killing people left and right. You know that Scarpa or his people might come after you. Are you not going to defend yourself? Now, I can't speak for Billy Catolo. I don't know what happened, but what I could say reading these stories and these narratives, like you're saying, oh, you know, Billy was shooting back or defending himself, or he went to attack. People are trying to kill them. They don't know what's going on.
But I think the overarching thought was, as history tells us, well, I'm not saying it happened or not, but history tells us that it was Orena versus Persico, and it was. Listen, you're saying you don't believe that. You're saying it was all a plot by.
I do not believe that. My grandfather obviously is a very
How would he feel about Persico? Can you tell us?
Let me go back to what I was saying. I think, you know, my grandfather's character, he's a very honorable guy. He's, you know, he sticks to what he believes. It just is what it is. I think that it was a great story and a narrative they came up with. Oh, Vic wanted to get power. Vic wanted to do this. There was no issues with anybody until Scarpa's crew came after my grandfather that day. Okay. And everybody knew that Scarpa was like, nobody was around Scarpa. Even my grandfather, he was supposedly on probation. He wasn't around him. So you have to think for a second, like none of these pieces match up. Okay. And as much information as they have against my grandfather, you know, you have all these testimonies for people that, you know, even on the, you know, a certain murder or whatever, they said that my grandfather turned, you know, Al Diarco, a statement he was a liar to, turned and said, like, my grandfather said to him in Italian, like, you know, whatever the phrase was, that he did the hit. My grandfather does not speak one word of Italian. Okay. That would be like a scene from like Sister, you know, what's that show where the girl's speaking Spanish and she doesn't speak a word of it? It sounds like the most. My grandfather doesn't speak Italian. His father died when he was 5 years old. They were here for generations. They wanted to be Americanized. He called himself Vic, you know, to make it, you know, we're not living in a world where we speak Italian. We don't. And one of the questions I had even as a little girl is like, why don't we speak Italian? We just did not hold on to the language. We've been here for generations and generations. So you hear stuff like that. And I'm like, he wasn't even that type of guy that would pretend he did. You know, it's just, so you hear some of these things and you're like, this is wild. But you know what's not wild is like, you know, like I said, with Devecchio clearing the path for Scarpa to do some of these crazy things. I mean, they knew he was killing people. Did you ever see the Anderson Cooper video?
Yes, I have. 60 Minutes, yeah.
So even when he said, did you know that Scarpa was killing people? And he's like, yeah, well, you know, what was I going to do? He just smirked at me and these were bad people.
No, Lin Devecchio is a major scumbag. I mean,
you could have stopped how many murders?
Sure.
Okay. Sure. Now, for example, even in the Sparacco letters here, he talks about the amount of times that any of Scarpa's crew were pulled over with guns. And the FBI would look at the trunk, look at the car, and pretend they saw nothing. Okay. And it's documented. This is all here. Okay. They were pulled over numerous times with guns. So now if the FBI knows these are killers, these people are shooting each other, why not get them the hell off the street then? They have everything they need right now to save lives and stop the bullshit. They wanted this to carry on. Okay. Now you have people that were getting arrested for guns and taken off the street. It's kind of weird that they were all, you know, so-called arena side people that they wanted to pull so that Scarpa could go in and do more damage. Every single time there were talks of peace or people were like, what's going on here? Scarpa struck. So there would be another situation where all of a sudden Scarpa was out there causing more chaos. This is known. Okay.
But hold on. What do you say though? I'm not saying me, but the people that say, well, hold, you know, whether or not, Jack, I get it. It's your grandpa. I totally get it. I hurt for you. But the truth is, your grandfather was a mobster, and it's probably unlikely that he didn't have some.
So you're saying, you know, he's involved with organized crime. He's this, he's that. The people that know him, okay, most of the people that are telling their story right now really never been around my grandfather. Okay, we're talking about rats that maybe never met him. Okay, and they have a lot to say. All right. The true character of somebody. My grandfather was never one of these vicious killers. He was never one of these people. Was he involved in organized crime? Did he hang out with the wrong people? Did he grow up around them? And this is kind of like lifelong friends and whatever. And yes, no one's denying that my grandfather had involvement with the wrong people. However, that does not make him guilty of
a killer. Right. I get what you're saying.
That does not make him guilty of everything. Okay. Just because I'm Italian and my last name's Orena doesn't mean I'm involved in organized crime.
Sure.
I run a legitimate business, but you know what? People say crazy things.
Yeah.
You know, they might say, oh, well, she comes from this family or she comes from that. It doesn't matter. You know, this is all hearsay. So,
well, that's the sad part of all this. And I've talked.
That's why it's easy to pin things on certain people as well.
And I've used the example of the Gotti name, right? Just because your name is Gotti does not mean, you know, most of them are not connected to the mafia literally at all. Like they're just regular people, but they've been stereotyped. And that is sad. And that's what saddens me about you and all of these people. They are profiled. Sadly, we profile a lot of people in this country. But so look, nobody's going to argue. Greg Scarpa, definitely a scumbag. And you're stating that you believe a lot of it was an overarching kind of plot by the government.
I think they wanted, at that time, you have to take in consideration too, the FBI agents that were arresting some of these big people were like superstars. They're on TV doing whatever. Sure. So at the time, this was the greatest thing in the world. And who's stopping the FBI?
Nobody.
You don't have somebody above Lin Devecchio saying to him, like, what are you doing, buddy? He's literally going to see his CIs without anybody else there.
Yeah.
Most FBI agents go in with somebody. There's a report of every correspondence. I mean, I run a med spa, and every time any of my nurses speak to a patient, they're writing a documented note.
Sure.
So you're telling me with major criminals and a major organization and major CIs that are so like, you know, important that we're not documenting. There's not another person in the room. If that doesn't scream shady, I don't know what does.
And the stuff with your grandpa happened right after all that commission stuff. Rudy Giuliani becomes this big, powerful guy due to him bringing it down.
What do you think that did to the ego of all these
we have emboldened
people? We could be super cop.
Sure.
Now, somebody like Devecchio, I mean, listen, Scarpa's son even said he got over $100,000 of street money. Scarpa was giving him cash. You have Scarpa's, woman that, stated this stuff. You have the son. Everybody's saying this information, right? You have Sparacco's letter. He says a ton of times how many, I mean, it's wild. He's like, they knew people were killing people. They knew we had guns. They took a bag of guns from me. And this is another thing I want to talk about. In my grandfather's case, there was a bag of guns that was clearly planted in his yard. Okay. The house that he was staying in at the time, in court, when my dad's case came up, they showed a house with a fence around it. And they were like, well, this is the house. How would somebody go plant the guns? Scarpa Jr. said that the guns were planted by Devecchio and Scarpa. That's his story, right? They're showing a house with a fence around it. That was a construction fence from the house 2 years prior. There was no fence in that house. Do you think somebody that just went off and killed a bunch of people is going to stick guns in a garbage bag and just shove it right in the deck, like right there? I mean, okay, great. Now there's a giant fingerprint on the bag. So my father's jury was smart enough to ask, like, hey, so can we see this bag? Do you know what the FBI said? We can't find it.
Of course not.
Lose a major piece of evidence. How does something like that go missing? Now, even in this thing, one of the jurors that were quoted, they said it was a bit scary. Juror 238. The FBI was feeding information to someone so deadly, Scarpa. It was him, Scarpa, who made it seem like a war was going on. Devecchio, who has been reassigned to another squad, denies any wrongdoing. Testimony showed that he's the subject of an internal FBI review, which means, hey, we're going to look into this. Okay, pal. That's how deep an FBI internal investigation is going to go. Jurors also said that they were disturbed by 4 missing pieces of evidence: a gun, shell casings, a photo of a van used in a shooting, and a garbage bag that held a pile of handguns. How do you lose major evidence?
Well, but I think we've seen policing, they will do what they have to do to bring in arrests. I mean, this is the highest level policing. So
a regular cop pulled over Scarpa with a gun and he threw it out the window. And what did he do? He called Devecchio. And what did Devecchio do? Say, leave it alone. So, it's the same thing with Sparacco. He was committing crimes and he kept calling Ken Brown. There's like, they joke about it in here. He's like, I'd call Ken Brown. Ken Brown's like, oh, I'm retired, but I called Devecchio and don't worry, you're getting out, bud. This is what we're talking about. So people are being killed. This war is going on. You could stop it. You could prevent it. But instead, you're fueling it. Why?
Well, because in the end, all of the people that they wanted off the street, they got off the street. And they did the same thing. I always go back to Gravano. It's the government hated John Gotti more than they hated Gravano, and they were willing to do anything they had to do. We've seen it in modern day with people like Joey Merlino. They will do what they have to do to bring these people off the street because they have been asserted as the people at the top and they want them off. As you alluded, and you said it very smart, you get promotions from big arrests. You arrest Vic Orena and Carmine Persco and all these different people. You get big, you get promotions.
I mean, all of the prosecutors and the people that were involved with all of the organized crime stuff were now the people going after the president. So how much higher could they have climbed?
What are your thoughts on Larry Mazza? Larry Mazza's been.
I literally don't know him.
You don't?
No.
Yeah, he's talked a lot about. Obviously he was.
The only thing that I knew of him, like somebody sent me an article that he said that he was in a cell with my grandfather, which was 100% inaccurate. So once somebody just like lies about something that dumb, I don't pay attention. I can't pay attention to a lot of the stuff that people say. That's just, I don't. My family was never around these people like that, so they don't pay attention to like.
So your hope is, and you've tried to file for compassionate release several times. I know you're still feverishly working on that. But I want to go back to this article because I want to talk a little bit about his condition currently. This woman writes that there's a prisoner who thinks he is the warden. I'm the boss. I'm going to fire you. Victor Orena will tell the prison staff. And it goes into discussing that, Orena is studiously aloof some days he's, completely fine. But this is the sad reality of dementia, right, Jackie? There'll be days where he'll tell you stories about when he was 5 years old. There'll be stories where, he thinks that, he doesn't even know where he is. Can you just kind of describe his everyday condition at this point with his diagnosis?
Yeah, so obviously with dementia, he's had it for a very long time now. So it started where he'd be like somewhat confused and mixed up details and whatever, and then it got to the point where today, like, he calls me basically every day. And most of the conversation is just a bunch of nonsense. Like, he'll call and he'll be like, "Oh, hey, did you pick up my suits?" or whatever. I think he thinks that he's married to me or something,
Yeah.
And he'll be like, "Oh, did you get this? Did you do this?" And whatever. And I'll just say, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." Because if you say no, he's like, "What do you mean?" He doesn't understand that it's not a reality. So
It's very, very sad, isn't it? It's to
it's
think about that.
it's so sad because at this point too, like you touched on before, saying, "Oh, these people are involved in crime and blah blah blah." Yes, to a certain aspect.
Long time ago, though.
Long time ago. Listen, my family has not gotten in trouble. My dad's been home for 25 years or so. They live normal lives. Nobody has involvement with anything. You're talking about a 90-year-old guy that needs assistance showering, going to the bathroom, brushing his teeth. Okay. He can't see. He has glaucoma. He's completely blind. He can't dial numbers. He's in a wheelchair. He can't walk. Okay. He has major health issues. You have people that work for the New York Times that I have no idea who this person is, reporting on how pathetic his condition is, that he sits there and he's not sure of who he is and he'll boss people around and then he'll sit there and, the
I heard
thing
at one point he claimed he was the president at one point.
that was in an article. It's not that he thinks he's the actual president. He'll just say like he's, in charge over there. You got to listen to me or whatever because he wants to get out. Or he'll say, "I'm stuck in this place. I don't know where I am. Can you come pick me up?" And, it's heartbreaking to me because he thinks like I have the power to just pull up in a car and take him home. So for me, it's like, at a certain point, our elderly ones that we, our parents, our grandparents, they end up becoming the children in a sense. And his mind's so innocent at this time and he's so fragile. And it's the complete opposite. Listen, don't get me wrong. He's still stubborn as all hell, but he, there's a certain innocence to it and the conversations and it's just he doesn't really know who he is. He probably wouldn't remember if I brought up half the things that they accused him of. He'd be like, "You're kidding me." I could say to him like, one day he knows he's in jail. The next day he's like, "Oh, you're picking me up? I'm in the hospital." It's every day is different. He has no idea what's going on. He just wants to, be home, obviously, because we want him to be home so bad. I don't think he actually knows the difference about where he is. I think at this point, it's only us that are serving this sentence. He's checked out a long time ago. So if they think they're punishing my grandfather by keeping him in there,
They're not.
really just the innocent family members that have now been fighting for decades for him to come out.
Especially, and when we especially know that a lot of the case that was built against him was from that of a person who was given carte blanche to really do whatever they wanted. The FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, should be ashamed of the behavior of Lin Devecchio. I think that's the biggest indictment on all this. Lin Devecchio is living a life. I believe he runs a security company. I've tried to get him on the show and he's declined. He won't come on. He won't speak about anything. John Connolly, another corrupt FBI agent, is doing time in prison for his behavior. Lin Devecchio should as well. Yeah, really sad. And I think you've been astute enough to say, he did things when he was younger, but some of the things that he's been painted as, and I think we as a society, Jackie, are just taught to just believe what these people tell us. Oh, well, he's an Italian guy and he kind of looks like he's in the mob. So he's in the mob.
Also, right? They came up with a very brilliant narrative before they went in there on their operation. They did. I think it was very well thought out. We'll just blame it on Vic. They already had other people, big people behind bars that they wanted to. So how are they going to work on him? Okay, this is the narrative. Now, if you're looking, like I said, it's Scarpa and his crew that were doing all of the killings, and Scarpa and his crew that just kept reopening up. And like anytime everything was okay, they just came in and it was like an attack, and even as far as like, I'm going to send this to you because I want you to read it. But even as far as Sparacco, he is quoted saying in his thing, and he is no friend of my family. He said, whatever could be done to win, to beat Vic was okay with them. He also refers to everything as what we were doing was so wrong, me and the FBI. He also says several times that people would get out and there would be major lawsuits if they only knew how the FBI was working. He talks about how many people were murdering people, how many times the FBI was letting other people catch charges for murders that they knew very well weren't committed by these men. What they weren't prepared for was somebody like, Carmine Sessa to start singing before he even got a cuff put on him. So that he talks about in here too. You have Spiracco in one room. They make the arrest and Devecchio has him sitting in there and he pops his head and he's like, give me a minute. And then he comes back and he goes, we're in trouble. Sessa's singing like a bird. And what happened was he's talking about the murders you did. And Spiracco's like, but you knew I did them. What's the problem? And the thing that says to me is maybe Devecchio knew, but he didn't report it to his superiors. And you have people like Chris Favo or whatever that was on the case, and he was an FBI agent that always went to see the CIs with another person. There was reports. He seemed to be more of like an honest agent. Then you have someone like Scarpa that's meeting this guy in a bar downtown, but then claiming he doesn't know him, but then he's writing about him in the book. None of the stories match up. Spiracco's talking about them letting him out of trouble with shootings and all this stuff. You dive into it and you get what you want, because I don't want to just come up with my story, but a lot of it does feed what we believe happened.
But it does fit, though, with the narrative of their goal is to do whatever they have to do to get the people they don't like in what they deem as positions of power. We saw it with these, John Gotti, with all these people. Okay. And it does make sense.
And these plays are in their playbook, whether they want to say they don't use them anymore or not. I mean, it's hard to, teach a old dog new tricks. So you have someone like Scarpa that has been doing this stuff since the 60s.
And Lin Devecchio was on trial for murder. We have to remember that. It's not like he was just this, good, maybe fringy, does bad things guy.
Feds didn't look into that. They should have opened that up. That should have been, tried federally, because I have more proof of them conspiring to murder together than anybody else that's been put away for life sentences for it. There's documented proof. I mean, you even have the 4 people. There's another article that I posted on my page you could check out. There's 4 other murders that, how would Scarpa know? If you go to, it's like under, if you keep going down, there's another article that you could see that shows 4 other murders that how would Scarpa know where these people were? There were addresses given out. Even Favo said that Devecchio came to him asking him for addresses of the Orena people.
You also mentioned how like certain meetings were happening and they just happened to like do those murders then. There is a lot of things that come back to what you're saying. I want to ask you, and I urge everybody, go check this out. I mean, look at some of the awareness here and some of this. Little Vic Orena has been in prison for what, Jackie? 33 years? Wow. I'm only 35, so that's pretty crazy to think about. Recently, a book was released, Larry McShane, who, I haven't said sometimes, Larry's been all right to me. He did put out a bizarre story about Carmine Persco several years ago.
I don't know anything about that. I don't know him. I don't know him personally. I did see that he was putting a book.
He had claimed that Carmine Persco was a rat, which it was not.
You know what? My family doesn't believe any of that. I don't know what his story is. I don't know what's in the book. I don't know what's going to come out. So
you're not connected to that.
No, not at all.
Okay.
I know he was doing research, he said, and reaching out to certain people. Everybody doing research is getting the same story. So I really don't know what's going to be in there. I don't know what story he's telling. I don't have, I don't know what's in the book at all. So once it comes out, someone's probably going to tell me and then I'll figure it out from there. But no, it's, the only person I can really say like that I speak to is my father, and my father doesn't seem to think that there's any truth to that either, so I can't speak for other people or what they're looking at, because I just started to dive into some of this myself. I'm reading old transcripts. I'm looking through my dad's case. I'm looking at all the evidence that was purposely withheld from my grandfather's case.
But my question remains, if you're going to write a book about Vic Orena, why wouldn't you go to the family of Vic Orena? I
think in his research, he might have reached out to certain people, but not, anybody that was.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. It just seems, I think sometimes books are written in just one way. Like, we're just going to go with what the government contends.
No, I mean, somebody sent me a thing saying this guy even, spoke to Devecchio to get information. So I don't know what's in there. If he did research and asked like somebody, hey, like what school did he go to? Like, that's fine. I don't know, but I have nothing to do with it at all. So I don't know. And I don't know what's in that book.
So it's 2025. You mentioned, your grandpa's been in prison for 30 plus years, right? He's developed dementia. He is in a really sad state. And regardless of how you feel about any of these people, he shouldn't be in prison. What's the happy ending you think here? I mean, do you think there will be one? What's your thought on it? Do you think it will happen?
I mean, listen, it's been a very long journey. For the last 3 decades, my family has been trying to do what they can. We've never given up on him. My uncle has been trying. We have lawyers that have been trying. I've filed for compassionate release. I told you probably 3 or 4 times.
Yep.
I'm not going to stop. I never actually spoke about a lot of the things in the proof and whatever, because I didn't think it was important at the time. But now that I'm very short for time and I don't know how many days he has left, I think that people need to hear some of the truth, and they need to know some of the things that their own government's responsible for. And I think that the timing now is better, because maybe 5 years ago, people would say, oh, you're crazy. But now after seeing what happened with Trump and things like that, there's a lot more that's being opened about some of these people. And there's a lot more people that do believe that the FBI can be very corrupt. And there's certain people that still have blindfolds on. But I think this is the time that I do talk about it, because whether or not I get him home or not, people should know, what type of government we're dealing with. People should know, because maybe it relates to their case. Maybe it relates to their loved one. And for me, I'm going to try my hardest to get my grandfather home one way or the other. And if not, if I could be helpful to other people and their journey, that's my way to give back, because the suffering that I've had over the last 3 decades dealing with this, I don't think that's fair for any child. I don't think that's fair for any family member. I don't think that's fair to the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren. I don't think that's fair to an elderly person. I mean, we treat really bad criminals better, and we're giving them, free passes, and we're giving them, compassionate release, and we're doing all this stuff for people that are, just out there hurting people, and they don't know the true story, and like I said, when the evidence is presented to a jury, which are normal people like you and me, that could base our own decision. These are educated people. When the evidence is put in front of them, they've acquitted dozens of men based on this relationship. And my grandmother was never given the opportunity. This evidence was withheld. It was never opened up for him to use that in his defense. He had no idea why he was under attack when this was going on, until we realized the relationship. Then it was, okay, this was obviously done on purpose. Nobody knew about it. So to me, this is a very blatant, setup. That's what I'm going to go with. At the end of the day, even if people don't want to look at that, we have a 90-year-old man that's in a wheelchair, that doesn't know his identity, that doesn't know where he is, that's being strapped to a bed for 18 hours a day so that he doesn't hurt himself. And we're just going to let this happen when his family can take care of him. You don't have to pay for it as a taxpayer. We'll deal with it. Just let this man die at home at peace, so his family can be freed of this life sentence that we've also endured.
And that's the most, one of the more astute, you said a lot of astute things. That's the most astute, is that it's not a prison sentence anymore for him. He doesn't know where he is.
He already did life
for you and for your mom and for your dad and for your brother.
He already served life. Okay. He's literally on his deathbed.
Yeah.
He's literally deteriorating worse and worse every day. We're not talking about punishing someone that even knows who they are or what's going on. At this point, we're serving the sentence, and that's what I stand by, and there's a lot of other people, even like Michael Sessa, that should not be in prison. There's a lot of people that they're taking these sentences and doing all this time, and they don't deserve to be there. So I think this voice is from, my family, for my grandfather, and the tons of other people that are wrongfully put away.
Yeah, your fight is very honorable. I think we all can agree with that. you created this website. You're trying to do what you can. I try to put you in touch with some people that maybe can help you. You know,
Yeah, I hope
our
so.
friend,
Thank you for that.
friend Chad Marks, he's done some good things with compassionate releases. Hopefully he can help you, or you can get him home. And I wish you all the best with this. I really do. I do think it's very sad that, you know, again, I'm in a weird spot with what I do just because I try to be fair with everything. But I think in this case, as you said, we are dealing with two people who were very, very cutthroat, one of which killed more people than virtually anybody ever associated with the mafia, and an FBI agent who was on trial for murder. I think we have to at least look at some of this stuff and ask ourselves, maybe we should relook
have
at
a little bit of fairness. So if we have just as much proof of, you know, Devecchio's involvement, you kind of have to treat people the same.
Right.
You know, everyone deserves a fair trial. This is the God live in. This is, you know, what they stand by. So, you know, let's make that happen. Why are we not being a fair place? This is what we strive on. This is America, right?
Well, luckily, looks like the FBI is starting to be out a little bit for some of their behavior, and you know, hopefully,
not quick enough.
Yeah,
yes.
Hopefully, we keep bringing awareness.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. That said, I wish you all the best with this. If there is a resolution, we'll obviously talk about it here. I hope, you know, at some point there is a happy ending for you and your family. And this is something we don't think about enough. The families of these people, the things that they have to go through. I also do want to shout out. I believe it's your brother. I like him, Vic Orena.
Yes, that's my brother Vic.
He's a good guy. I've talked to him once in a while. He does great work with beats and things like that. Really talented dude. And you know, I wish you guys really all the best. I guess I'll kind of give you the final word. You know, let us know where we can kind of look into this. Free Little Vic. I see you've been doing some shows. You know whose show you should go on is Joey Molino. He's big on the
yeah.
FBI.
I've been talking to him. So, you know, for me, getting this out there and getting the story out there, and like I said, whether it helps me or you know, listen, there might be people out there that are watching that have information for me. There might be people that could help. You know, I created the website freelittlevic.com. You can email me at info@freelittlevic.com. There's an Instagram page. Basically what I'm doing is uploading articles. I mean, I have thousands of them, so there's only one me. So I'm just uploading a few a day if I can. Anything that pertains to him, the case. There might be another side of that website that's going to have a lot of evidence that's uploaded to it. But yeah, I just want to bring awareness to this. I think the story and the narrative that is out there is incorrect. I think, you know, it's a shame that we never had the chance to even present our story in court. You know, my grandfather was deprived a lot of his basic human rights over the last 3 decades. And, you know, to be tied up and sitting where he is, it's just a shame. And I don't think that, you know, my family deserves to watch him deteriorate anymore. You know, you're not torturing him. It's just
you're torturing, yeah.
It's just everybody else. So if there's any, you know, information people want to see, maybe some of the things I post can help their loved one. Like I said, there's different people that I've been in touch with. I'm just trying to grow the network and try to get any information I can.
Well, there's so many people that watch this show that are in that area. Maybe there's one way someone can help each other. freelittlevic.com. Make sure you go check it out. Jackie, I wish you all the best. I really hope you get to have your grandpa come home. I don't have any grandparents, and I think your fight is super honorable. And I would probably do the same thing.
Thank you so much.
I wish you all the best. Thanks everybody for watching. Go check out freelittlevic.com. Check out what Jackie's doing, trying to bring some awareness, and hopefully a happy ending comes to you. All right, guys, we're out of here. We'll see you next week. Thanks for coming on, Jackie. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.